In the quiet town of Ebon, where red dust danced through the streets and the evening drums echoed with stories of old, there lived a woman named Mama Nina, a woman whose faith was as fierce as the African sun. Every morning before dawn, her voice would rise through the mist, calling upon heaven with such passion that even the roosters waited for her amen before crowing. She was the kind who never missed a single church service, who fasted until her bones ached, and who spent every last coin on offerings, believing that one day God Himself would appear to bless her door. But everything changed the day Pastor Shigozi arrived. He was young, charismatic, and had the kind of smile that made even unbelievers kneel. He called his church Fire of Thunder Ministries, and within a week the whole town was talking about him. His sermons were like storms, full of thunder and lightning, filled with words that shook the heart and promises that tickled the soul. People claimed he healed the blind, cast out demons, and even raised the dead. Mama Nina was instantly drawn to him. She gave more, prayed harder, and shouted louder. "This is a man of God," she told her daughter Amaka. But soon, strange things began to happen. Mama Nina's laughter faded, her eyes sank deep into shadows, and she started speaking in her sleep. Neighbors whispered that her prayers had become screams. Amaka, worried, followed her one night to a secret deliverance service. Inside the candlelit church, Pastor Shigozi stood in the center, his voice deep and strange, chanting in a language no one understood. Women knelt before him, trembling as he sprinkled them with a red liquid and shouted, "The spirit of obedience must enter you." Mama Nina fell to the ground, shaking violently, her lips moving without sound. Amaka's heart pounded as she watched from behind a pillar. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. She ran to Papa Odenigbo, the old blind prophet who lived by the river. When she told him what she had seen, his face turned pale beneath the moonlight. "Child," he whispered, "that man does not serve the light. His power comes from beneath the earth, and your mother walks the path of danger." The prophet's words chilled her blood. "What can I do?" she asked, trembling. "Pray," he said, "but not in that church. Pray to the true spirit before the false one devours her." That night, the wind rose violently over Ebon. The candles in Mama Nina's room flickered and died. A strange laugh echoed through the air, sounding like Pastor Chigozi's, carried by the storm. Mama Nina woke, screaming, clutching her chest, while somewhere in the darkness, a shadow moved across the cross on her wall, and for the first time, she felt that the prayers she had been shouting for so long were no longer her own. The storm that night refused to rest, and neither did Amaka. The memory of her mother trembling before Pastor Shigozi haunted her like a shadow that would not fade. By the next evening, curiosity and fear had merged into something stronger, a need for truth. So, when the church bell rang for the so-called midnight fire prayer, she wrapped herself in a shawl, painted her face with ashes to disguise herself, and slipped silently into the darkness. The church looked different at night. No singing, no clapping, no joyful hallelujahs, only whispers and the low hum of drums that didn't sound quite human. As Amaka hid behind a cracked wall, she saw Pastor Shigozi enter, wearing a long crimson robe instead of his usual white garment. Around his neck hung a chain of bones, and in his hand a black book bound in animal skin. He was not alone. 6 other men in robes followed him, their faces hidden by masks shaped like skulls. They moved in a circle, chanting words that made Amaka's blood turn cold. Spirits of fire and wealth, rise and obey. Shigozi shouted, his voice deep and echoing. The candles around them flickered blue, casting strange symbols on the walls. Amaka's eyes widened as she saw her mother's photograph. Yes, Mama Nina's picture, placed in the center of the circle. The pastor poured palm oil over it, then a red powder that smelled of blood. This one has given much, he said darkly. Now her soul belongs to the altar. The other men murmured, so be it. Amaka bit her hand to stop herself from screaming. Her heart thudded so loud she feared they would hear it. Then the pastor raised his hands, and a low growl filled the room, not from any animal, but from beneath the ground. The floor trembled, and a faint shadow rose from the earth, shaped like a human but without eyes. It crawled toward the photo, touching it with a clawed hand. Take her dreams, Shigozi commanded, so she will serve without question. The shadow vanished into the image, and instantly the candle flames shot up like fire spears. The ritual ended. The pastor wiped sweat from his brow, smiling in satisfaction. Tomorrow, he whispered, we will begin the offering. As the others left, Amaka stayed frozen until silence returned. Her knees gave way, and tears streamed down her face. He is no man of God, she whispered. He is the devil dressed in silk. But before she could escape, one of the masked men turned back, sniffing the air. Someone is here, he hissed. Amaka's breath caught. She crawled through the back door, cutting her arm on broken glass, and ran until her feet bled. When she reached home, her mother was sitting upright on the bed, her eyes wide open but unseeing. Mama, she cried, shaking her, we must leave that church. But Mama Nina only smiled faintly. The pastor said, I am chosen, and tomorrow the fire will purify me. Her voice sounded strange, too calm, too cold. Amaka stepped back, terrified. Something had already begun to change inside her mother. Outside, thunder growled again, and from the far-off church, a single drumbeat echoed, slow, heavy, and full of warning. The night that followed was unlike any other in the memory of Ibun. The moon rose, not silver, but deep red, a blood moon that painted the rooftops in a strange, haunting glow. The elders whispered that it was an omen, a warning that something unnatural was walking among the living. Amaka sat beside her mother, watching her closely. Mama Nina had stopped eating and speaking, spending every moment in front of a small candle that refused to melt, whispering prayers that no one could understand. Her voice carried a rhythm that wasn't hers, low, repetitive, almost. Ancient Mama, Amaka whispered, please, stop this. We can pray to God in our home. But Mama Nina turned slowly, her pupils faintly red in the candlelight. He is not just a man, Amaka, she murmured. He is the bridge between heaven and power. Then she smiled, a smile that wasn't her own. Fear wrapped around Amaka like chains. She ran to Papa Odenigbo, again, tears streaming down her face. The old prophet sat by his fire, waiting, as if he had known she would come. The shadow has entered her, he said softly. Your mother's spirit is bound to his altar. Tonight, he will complete the sacrifice beneath the blood moon. Amaka's voice shook. Then we must stop him. The prophet nodded slowly. You cannot face darkness with fear, child. Take this." From a small gourd, he poured a clear liquid into her hands. "River water, blessed under the old moon. Sprinkle it on her heart before midnight, or she will never wake again." Amaka raced through the forest, her bare feet pounding the earth, guided by the eerie red light above. The drums of fire of Thunder Ministries echoed through the night, louder and faster than before. When she reached the church, the air smelled of blood and smoke. A crowd had gathered, eyes glazed as they chanted, "Fire, fire, fire." Pastor Shigozi stood at the altar, his robe glowing faintly under the crimson light. In front of him knelt Mama Nina, her hands bound with red cloth, her face lifted toward the burning cross. "Tonight," Shigozi thundered, "the heavens receive their gift. The flame that burns shall never die." The crowd screamed in madness. Amaka pushed her way through, but invisible hands seemed to hold her back. She could feel the air thick with evil, something ancient and hungry. The pastor raised a dagger carved with strange symbols, his voice growing louder. "Let the obedient soul return to the fire." Just as he was about to strike, Amaka hurled the gourd with all her strength. The water splashed across her mother's chest, glowing like lightning. The dagger froze mid-air. Mama Nina gasped and fell, screaming as smoke rose from her skin. The crowd shrieked and scattered. The pastor roared, his eyes blazing red. "Who dares interrupt the covenant?" His voice was not human anymore. The ground split open beneath him, flames flickering from the cracks. Amaka dragged her mother away, crying out to the heavens, "God, if you still hear us, save her." And for a moment, the red moon dimmed, as if the sky itself was listening. The pastor lunged toward them, but before he could reach, a blinding light burst from the river beyond the church, a voice echoing through the air, deep and ancient. "Enough." The fire went out, the drums stopped, and Pastor Shigozi vanished into the smoke like a shadow swallowed by dawn. Amaka fell beside her mother, trembling as the blood moon slowly turned pale. Chapter 4. The pastor who vanished in smoke-wind dawn finally touched the edges of the village. The world felt heavier, as if the night's horror had left behind a stain that sunlight could not wash away. The people who had gathered at the Fire of Thunder Ministries awoke with no memory of the blood moon or their screams, their minds blank, their souls trembling without knowing why. But Amaka remembered everything. She sat by her mother's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall slowly, her skin pale but warm. Papa Adinigbu entered quietly, leaning on his staff. "The spirit of darkness is wounded but not dead," he said. "The pastor has vanished, but his shadow still lingers." Outside, whispers spread through the village of a strange fog that drifted from the church ruins, of voices calling from within the smoke, promising wealth and power to those who dared to listen. Amaka knew he was still there. That same evening, she returned to the church, its walls blackened by the strange fire, the air thick with the stench of ash. She could hear faint footsteps echoing inside. "You should not have come back," a voice said from the darkness. It was Pastor Shigozi, or what was left of him. His once smooth face was now cracked like burnt clay, his eyes hollow pits glowing faintly red. He stood amidst the broken altar, his crimson robe now tattered, his voice still carrying the weight of false holiness. "You ruined my covenant," he hissed. "Do you think you can undo what is written in blood?" Amaka stepped forward, clutching the small cross Papa Adinigbu had given her. You deceived my mother. You deceived them all. You will answer to God." The pastor laughed, a dry, hollow sound that sent chills through her bones. "God," he whispered mockingly. "I became what he refused to make me powerful, feared, eternal." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and from the cracks, smoke poured out, forming the shapes of screaming faces. "They are my choir now," he said. "Their souls sing for me." Amaka closed her eyes, praying silently, the cross trembling in her hand. "Light of heaven, break the chains of darkness." The smoke began to swirl violently, forming a spiral that pulled at the pastor's robe. His eyes widened in fear for the first time. "No," he roared, clawing at the air. The cross in Amaka's hand glowed brighter, and the wind howled through the church. One by one, the faces in the smoke screamed and vanished into light, freed from his curse. "You cannot destroy me," he cried. "I am fire itself." But the moment he spoke, the wind turned the flames against him. His robe caught fire, burning from the inside out. "You built your altar on lies," Amaka shouted, "and now it consumes you." With a final, ear-splitting scream, the pastor's body dissolved into smoke that rose toward the sky and disappeared. Silence fell. The church was nothing but dust and broken stones. Amaka fell to her knees, exhausted, tears mixing with the soot on her face. The sunrise broke through the clouds, painting the ruins gold. Behind her, Papa Odinigbo's voice echoed softly. "Evil may hide in the cloth of holiness, but truth always burns brighter." Amaka looked at the horizon, whispering, "May no one ever fall for false fire again." But deep in the forest, far beyond the village, a thin trail of smoke rose once more, twisting, whispering, waiting. Weeks passed, and the village slowly returned to its rhythm, but the air carried a silence that was not peace. It was the silence of something watching, waiting. The people rebuilt their homes, avoided the ruins of the Fire of Thunder Ministries, and whispered Amaka's name with both gratitude and fear. Mama Nina, though alive, had changed. Her eyes often drifted to the horizon, as if she could still hear distant drums. Amaka tried to forget, but every night she dreamed of the blood moon and the crimson robe that refused to burn completely. One night, as the wind howled through the trees, she heard it again, a voice in the smoke that rose from their hearth. Soft at first, almost a whisper. "Child of light, you think you have one." Her heart froze. The fire flickered blue, and from the corner of her hut the smoke thickened, curling into a faint human form, the face of Pastor Shigozi, half burnt, half shadow. "You destroyed my altar," he said, his voice echoing like thunder trapped in a bottle, "but the promise still stands. Every soul that believed in me still carries my mark." Amaka backed away, clutching the charm around her neck. "You are nothing but ash," she said firmly. "Your fire is gone." He laughed, a sound that made the walls tremble. "Fire never dies, girl. It only moves." His eyes gleamed red as he pointed toward the distant hills. "A new church rises there, led by one of my own. When the next blood moon comes, all that you love will burn." The smoke lashed out like a whip, striking the walls and leaving black scars. Amaka screamed and called out, "Papa Odenigbo." The old prophet burst in moments later, his staff glowing with white light. He raised it high, shouting words older than memory, and the smoke twisted violently, shrieking as if in pain. "Back to the void," he commanded. A sudden burst of light filled the room, blinding and hot. When Amaka opened her eyes again, the smoke was gone, but in its place, the word "return" was burned into the wall. Papa Odenigbo sighed heavily. "He is bound to his followers. Evil rooted in faith is hardest to kill." Amaka trembled. "Then what do we do?" The old man looked at her with sad eyes. "You do what the true believers must always do. Fight light with light." The next day, Amaka and her mother gathered the villagers and told them the truth. Every dark secret, every ritual, every lie. Some wept, others refused to believe. But those who had seen the blood moon in their dreams nodded in silent fear. Together, they tore down the remnants of the church and planted palm trees where the altar once stood, symbols of life rising from death. Still, as the days passed, a faint trail of smoke could always be seen beyond the hills. Sometimes, at dusk, the wind carried whispers that spoke of fire that would rise again. Amaka stood beneath the palm trees, her hand clutching her mother's, and said softly, "If the fire returns, then so will I." The wind answered with a sigh, and the sun sank slowly behind the horizon, painting the sky the color of blood. Years passed, and peace seemed to have settled over the land, or so it appeared. The children born after the blood moon knew nothing of Pastor Shigozi, nothing of the night when the sky turned red and the earth swallowed a man of false fire. Yet, in the nearby town of Ibeku, whispers began to stir again. A new preacher had arrived, Pastor Emmanuel, a young man with a golden voice and eyes that glowed faintly under torchlight. He preached with passion, healing the sick, making the barren conceive, and turning water into something that glittered like wine. People called him the second fire. They came from miles away, bringing offerings, kneeling in tears. And once more, the drums began to beat at midnight. When Amaka heard of it, her heart sank like a stone. She was older now, but her spirit had not dimmed. "It begins again," she whispered to Mama Nina, who nodded slowly, her eyes heavy with memories. Together, they traveled to Ibeku under the cover of dusk. What they found made Amaka's blood run cold. A massive wooden church painted in red and gold, with a blazing sun symbol carved above the entrance, identical to the one Pastor Shigozi once used. The crowd inside swayed like waves, chanting, "Fire, fire, fire." Amaka pushed her way through, her gaze fixed on the man standing on the altar. Pastor Emmanuel smiled, raising his hands, and for a brief moment the air shimmered with heat. But when he looked down at her, the smile froze, his eyes flared crimson. "Ah," he said softly, voice layered with something inhuman, "the child who tried to kill the flame." The crowd fell silent as the air thickened, the torches flickering blue. "You cannot stop what is eternal," he said, his voice shifting, merging with the one she knew too well. "Did you think death could hold me?" Amaka stepped forward, her hands trembling but firm. "You lost your power when truth burned your altar." The pastor's laugh filled the hall. "Truth," he sneered. "Truth is what people choose to believe, and they believe me." The congregation nodded, their eyes glowing faintly red, their minds enslaved again. Amaka closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of old words her mother taught her after the last battle. The torches flickered violently. Pastor Emmanuel's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Amaka opened her eyes, now glowing with pure white light. I am calling on the fire that purifies. A gust of wind ripped through the church, scattering chairs and breaking the cross in half. The false pastor screamed as smoke burst from his skin, the spirit of Shigozi clawing to escape. "No," he roared. "I am fire." But this time, Amaka raised both hands, light pouring from her palms like the sun itself. "Then burn," she said. The smoke twisted, shrieked, and burst into thousands of sparks that rained down like falling stars. When the light faded, the church was silent. The people blinked, dazed, freed from the trance. Pastor Emmanuel lay still, his body turning to ash. Amaka fell to her knees, exhausted, and whispered, "Let this be the last flame." Mama Nina placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder, tears in her eyes. "You have done what even angels fear to do." But as they left, deep within the ashes, a single ember glowed, faint, pulsing, alive. Long after the fire in Ibeku's grand church died down, a stillness blanketed the land, heavy and uneasy, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the brave woman who silenced the false prophet. Amaka's name became a legend, sung by children around evening fires. But legends have a way of inviting the attention of old, restless things. One night, while the moon lay hidden behind clouds, a traveler passed through Ibeku carrying a small wooden box. He said it was a gift, a relic from the holy fire that once blessed the church. The people, blinded by faith and greed, welcomed him without question. When the box was opened before the altar, they gasped at what they saw, a single ember, faint but alive, glowing with a strange, pulsing red. "It never dies," the traveler said, smiling. That night, the drums began again. In her home, miles away, Amaka woke suddenly, drenched in sweat. Her dreams had returned, a deep voice whispering, "You cannot kill what was born of belief." She lit a candle, praying softly, but the flame bent sideways, as if drawn toward the east, toward Ibeku. Mama Nina, older and frailer now, stirred awake. "He calls again," she murmured. "The fire feeds on their faith." Without hesitation, Amaka packed her things and began the long walk back. When she arrived, the once peaceful village was different. The air was thick with smoke, and the people's eyes shone faintly red once more. The new church, rebuilt from the ashes, was glowing from within, a heartbeat of flame rising and falling with each chant of the crowd. At the altar stood not a man, but a figure made entirely of smoke and fire, the shadow of Pastor Shigozi, reborn through belief alone. His laughter echoed through the church walls. "You see, child," he thundered, "I do not need a body to live. I live in their devotion, their fear, their need for miracles." Amaka's heart pounded, but she did not retreat. "Then I will burn every lie they built for you," she said. She stepped forward, the air scorching her skin. From her satchel, she pulled out a clay jar filled with river water, the same that once saved her mother. The spirit laughed. "That won't work twice." But Amaka was not the same frightened girl he once tormented. "It's not the water," she whispered. "It's the truth carried within it." She smashed the jar at her feet, and the water spread across the floor, turning to radiant light. The congregation screamed as the glow spread like dawn, burning through their crimson eyes, washing away the spell. The fiery figure howled, twisting violently, trying to hold shape. "You cannot destroy faith," it roared. "No," Amaka said, her voice calm and fierce, "but I can show them where to place it." She raised her hands, calling the light higher until it consumed the entire church in blinding radiance. When the brilliance faded, the building was gone, replaced by soft earth and silence. The villagers stood dazed, their eyes clear, their minds free. Amaka knelt, trembling, and saw only a pile of black ash where the altar once stood. Among it, a single ember flickered, and then, finally, went out. She closed her eyes, tears of relief streaming down her face. "It is finished," she whispered. But far away, deep in the forest, a faint wisp of smoke drifted upward, curling like a serpent, as if the fire still breathed, waiting for belief to feed it again. It had been months since the night the church disappeared, and the people of Ibeku began to live again without fear. The drums were silent, the skies clear, and for the first time in years, the moon shone white instead of red. Yet Amaka's spirit found no rest. Every night she dreamed of a river, wide, black, and endless, where voices called her name from beneath the surface. One evening, while fetching water from the real river that ran past the village, she saw it, a faint glow rising from the depths, like a dying flame gasping for air. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered, backing away. But the river began to ripple violently, and the glow turned into a fiery whirlpool. From its center, smoke erupted, and with it, the faint echo of that terrible laugh, Pastor Chigozi's voice, ancient and hollow. "You burned my altar, child," it hissed, "but you cannot drown fire. I am the promise in every desperate heart, the spark in every false prayer." The water boiled around her feet, steam hissing through the air. Amaka gritted her teeth, clutching the blessed charm that had never left her neck. "You feed on their blindness," she shouted over the roar of the river. "Then I will open their eyes, even if it costs me everything." She stepped into the current, the cold biting her skin. The spirit rose higher, its form now colossal, a tower of fire and water twisting together like a living storm. The sky darkened, thunder rumbling as wind tore through the trees. The villagers ran to the riverbank, watching in terror as lightning flashed around Amaka. "Leave her," Mama Nina cried, falling to her knees. "She has given enough." But Amaka only looked back once, smiling faintly. "Tell them to believe in truth, not in fear." She raised her hands, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Let light return to the source of life." The charm around her neck shattered, releasing a burst of white fire so bright it turned the river to glass. The demonic flame screamed, twisting, collapsing, trying to cling to her. "If I fall, you fall with me," it snarled. "Then let's fall together," Amaka whispered, stepping forward. The river exploded with light, then silence. When the villagers opened their eyes, the storm was gone. The water flowed calm and clear, and on its surface floated a single palm leaf glowing faintly before sinking beneath the waves. Mama Nina wept, knowing her daughter's soul had become part of the river itself, a guardian where evil once hid. From that day, no false preacher rose again in Ibeku. The people built no churches, only a small shrine by the riverbank, where the water glowed faintly each night as if whispering her name. They said, when the wind blew softly across the current, it carried her voice, warning and protecting forever. And though the world still held greed, lies, and hunger for false miracles, In that quiet corner of Africa, the fire of truth burned pure, hidden beneath the river where light and shadow met for the last time.